Hi there, I'm Mary Susie from Bead Me a Story, and today I'm going to show you how to make the box chain. So I have made this in 3 different sizes for you. This one uses 7.4 millimeter O-rings and 18 gauge 3/16 square jump rings. So you can see with the square jump rings, they give you this ultra shininess, and you see a lot more of the jump ring than you will the O-rings in this particular one. It's really pretty. The only downside to this one is sometimes you can get it a little bit overstretched out and need to flatten the rings a little bit. But this one's really lovely, and it's a nice small size to work with. The 7.4 millimeter O-rings are an 18 gauge 3/16 jump ring. Those sizes are the same thing. Okay, and that's why this is probably the most square, although you can see it's a little bit flatter on this side than it is when you look at it from the side. Okay, the next size that I did was the 12 millimeter O-ring with 16 gauge and 1/4 inch jump rings, and you can see this is like wider on this side than it is when you look at the up and down, and you can see all the rings being folded back on the sides. You see the jump rings on the outside of this. And then finally, I have this big chunky one that I absolutely love. I think this particular design just looks really great in a super chunky size. So I think a lot of you will like this just because it's something really different. And these are 15 millimeter O-rings, and I've used 16 gauge 3/8 inch jump rings. And if you happen to have 14 gauge 3/8 inch in your stash, I think that'll work just fine too. Okay, so I just want to show you, I have done this a lot in the past, and I just want to show you the reason. This is a really finicky one with size, and I just want to show you that this was perfect sometimes when I used a 10 millimeter O-ring and a 16 gauge 1/4 inch jump ring. But every so often I would get these ones that had this little kink in it, and it just would not smooth out. So I just don't like that size, because I think if the jump ring runs just a hair, just like 1/100th of a millimeter, a little bit thicker than usual, then this can happen where you get this kink, and I don't like that at all. You see even in this one, I've got a kink on the other side. So I don't like this size. I've tried this in a lot of different sizes, and I found these particular sizes to be the most successful. So these are the ones I made up kits, or you can buy the supplies, or if you already have the supplies to make this, go ahead. I've provided all the information for you. If you look at these listings on the website, there's actually links that'll take you to the supplies to make these. Okay, so without further ado, let's go ahead and get started. Okay, so to start a box chain, I just want you to notice that I am using a little bit larger pliers this time. Still using my 90-degree bent nose, and I'll be using them on this curved side. But because we're using such large rings in this tutorial, I can get away with using a much larger pliers. And this is kind of the purpose of these, is for when you're working with a little bit larger rings and you need to grab more territory to get a good grab on your rings, okay? So I picked up 4 rubber O-rings, as you saw. And I'm just gonna close the first jump ring, okay? And then I'm gonna take a second jump ring, and I'm gonna pass through the same 4 O-rings. This is just gonna sit beside the other jump ring, parallel to it, so just make sure you don't accidentally pass through that first ring. Okay. And now we have our first couple rows of O-rings and 1 row of jump rings. So what we're gonna do, this is a lot like if you've ever done Byzantine before. This is what we do for that. See how I'm folding these 2 rings back. Now, right now at this stage, I don't have anything to kind of hold everything in place. And these are really large rings, but I really wanted to use large rings so that you could see all the holes really, really well for making this. Okay, so I am going to, this is just like Byzantine, So I separate these two jump rings, and we're going to be passing underneath the two O-rings that are here. Okay? And with this, these are so big, like I said, you can see straight through everything. So I thought this would be a good one to do the tutorial with, so you can see everything really well. I'm always working in such tiny little micro sizes that it's fun to work chunky. Okay, so I passed this ring through. You can see it passed through the two rubber O-rings. The only thing holding them in place right now is me holding on to them with my fingers. But I'm going to pick up two new O-rings to start the next row with while I'm adding this jump ring. And that happens a lot when you're using anything with closed rings. You know, as you're attaching one of your jump rings that's open, you need to be attaching the next row of closed rings because of course they don't open and close. Okay, so it looks like this. And then once again, I'm going to do a second jump ring. Now I find it a lot easier to pass through the work and then come through the new O-rings that I added. I tried doing it the reverse way and it became real finicky, not smooth. You can do it any way you want to, and this is just what I found to be the fastest. Okay, so you can see we've already added that next row on. So now all we need to do is, once again, we're gonna fold back those two O-rings that we just added, and you can see that we can go straight through this hole. So we're gonna be passing under the two O-rings, and we're between the two jump rings that are here. That's really all there is to this weave. It's very, very simple. Okay, and the only part that's not simple about using big clunky items like this is they can fall out of place while we're working. So just be careful of that you know, you don't just let everything hang loose while you know, spend a bunch of time closing rings. Some of the smaller ones may be a little easier if you're having trouble with it, with these rings falling down and letting your shape come out, but this isn't too bad. I didn't have any trouble as I was working on it. It wasn't real noticeable. Okay, and I'm gonna pass through with second ring once again. Pass through these two new O-rings I added. Close the jump ring. Okay, and then we'll just fold these back and keep going. So we're just gonna keep adding to the length of this until we get this the size that we want. And if you bought a kit, there's a size chart in the kit. Otherwise, when I put the supplies out, I put it for like an 8-inch wrist. So I put pretty much the amount of materials that ends up being in the kit so that it can accommodate pretty much any size. Okay, so keep working on this and I'll be back in just a second to show you what it looks like when we have the whole row of it and how to finish it. Okay, so you can see here that I've reached the end of my chain that I need, the length that I need, and these are the last two O-rings and jump rings that I added. So I'm gonna fold these back. Okay, and I just have two more jump rings that I'm gonna add to complete this whole thing. So I'm gonna take my first jump ring. You can see I've folded back my rubber rings already, right here. And I'm gonna split the two jump rings, passing in between them, but underneath the rubber rings, just like we've been making the chain. And now I'm not adding any more rings to my chain. So what needs to happen at this point is we're gonna come and join this to the starting end. Now the starting end has, you can see this kind of has two extra rubber O-rings on the end, okay? So we need to, first of all, make sure everything's straight, but I'm gonna kind of turn my work this way so that I can see the split of these rings, okay? And then what I like to do, you don't have to do it this way. You could go from inside to outside, the left one first, and then through the right. But when you start working with some of the smaller sizes, this is huge sizing. I almost never work in sizes this large. I like to do the right side first because I'm right-handed and that prong is back towards me. So it's easier to feed in this right prong first, and then I can grab the right side of the jump ring and see how the prong is away from me. So then I can feed that into this other side a little bit easier, okay? And then you see, so see how that's passing through the two O-rings, and then instead of adding two new ones, we actually went from the inside to the outside, these two from the starting row that were already there. Okay, and then we're gonna close. Okay, and then, oops, oh, and I made a mistake. So actually this is a good one to show you. So be really careful that your stuff isn't all twisted around. I actually attached that backwards. So let's do that all over again, and it's okay. Just so you see that I do this stuff sometimes too. It's not just you, it's all of us who make these little errors. Okay, so somehow that got twisted around. So I'm gonna feed this up this way, okay? So see how I have it laying down now, so you can see that if I do this right side first, see how I just hooked that through? It's probably almost better for you to see this if I have it laying down like it is, and then the left side. And now it should be straight. Okay, so now all we need to do is just flip this over to the other side, and then we can get at these rings here. So just so you see, I'm gonna pass through, this would have been our final row. I'm gonna pass underneath these two O-rings, and then this one and this one here are the ones that I'm gonna be feeding back out of from the inside to the outside. Okay, so first I'm gonna pass through those two rings. Then, as I said, you don't have to do it this way, but I like to feed because the prong is back. It's the harder one to get hooked through something. I like to feed that right prong through first, and then feed the left one through. Okay, and then our bracelet is finished. So as I've said before, this is a huge size, but I think sometimes doing really exaggerated, super chunky sizes is really fun and different. And you know, a lot of people like to wear this kind of style. So I thought this particular weave would be a really fun one to show you this in the 15mm size O-ring, so you can see how chunky this can be.